What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. We are here to talk today about how to prepare as macro trackers to go into the holiday season. A lot of you don't coach with us, but if you're joining us midstream, go back and watch part 1 and part 2. This is part 3, where I'm going to talk about the benefit of being in a more maintenance mindset during the holiday season and what you need to do right now by working hard on food quality, making sure that you do not get sick here in the next 5 or 6 weeks, getting enough sleep, adequate water, adequate micronutrients, which is also going to come from food quality. In my coaching group, I do notice that people go in phases. They will prep really well for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and then they fall back into the pattern of just kind of grab and go with their macronutrition. Because flexible dieting is such that you can use it and almost use any form of food to get to your goals each day, sometimes that process can be a little bit messy. So the first thing we want to establish is when you are going to be maintaining probably the month of December, and for some of you from Thanksgiving all the way through the new year. That's a very short time frame. That is only 1 month. 1 month out of your year could be for maintenance. In fact, I recommend 3 or 4 months out of the 12 months being maintenance months. Now, whether you split those up into 2-week time frames, 1 month time frames, and you know that you need the accountability, I would recommend that you check in with an online system or with your coach. Obviously, the people in my coaching course have a path of performance, and they also have a path that might kind of have a few little reroutes in it, if you will. So if we get to a point where I feel like the person is just absolutely struggling in their fat loss phase, I will usually bump them into a maintenance phase for a little while. Sometimes, depending again on their brain type, the amount of time that we have to get from where we're at to their goal, I might say, hey, let's go ahead and take a 5-day break, or let's take a 7-day break. We're going to eat closer to maintenance. We're going to refill those glucose stores. I can see that you're really struggling because you're going through this or this right now. Let's go ahead and try to prioritize some of the other things in life rather than being so strict with your tracking, because we're kind of setting you up for failure, where I think that when people have too much on their plate, they've got to let go and relax a little bit more. And it's obviously a lot easier to fill fats and carbs as macronutrients rather than to prep good, wholesome proteins. So we see a lot more in the way of supplementation with shakes and bars and things like that in maintenance phases, where that would not be a good approach when we're in a fat loss phase, where most of your food should be coming from solid forms, which keeps you satiated from meal to meal. One of the common mistakes that I see in fat loss phases that I don't necessarily see as much in maintenance phases is people not eating enough early in the day, and then the body asking for what it needs later in the day in the form of a binge or a session where the body isn't getting what it needs earlier. So you eat, and you eat very fast at night to get those needs met. Your brain doesn't have time to register that it's actually satiated, and then you overeat, not even planned, just on accident. That happens. So what I would recommend is for the next 5 or 6 weeks, from the middle of October through Thanksgiving, if you will, focus on good, high quality protein sources: lean chicken breast, lean turkey, lean ground beef, some salmon, obviously, eggs and egg whites mixed together to try to get those good, perfect, complete proteins in your system, with some vegan sources, beans, legumes, a lot of those wonderful beans and rice, cheese and rice. Watch the amount of processed and packaged foods that you're eating in a deficit, because when you move out of the deficit and into these maintenance phases, you're going to have a lot more to play around with. And of course, we know that high quality, nutrient dense food is going to be a lot better for you during those dieting timeframes, because you can fill your plate with so much more if you're eating high volume, lower calorie, high quality foods, rather than those highly palatable, excitatory foods that we love to have on occasion, that we can do in our maintenance phases and also on our diet breaks. So a diet break is not a break from dieting. A diet break is simply just moving someone to maintenance, which is what I prefer we do during the holiday time for that 3 or 4 weeks, or some people even just elect to do 1 or 2 weeks. Whether that starts, the week before Christmas or the week before New Year's, whatever this person might have as upcoming social engagements, we kind of create the program around that. we also would structure the diet break around that. We would bring them slowly out of a fat loss phase 7 to 10 days beforehand, kind of gradually do a middle incremental increase, see how they do. Mentally, typically the feedback is that they feel so much better in the gym. Well, of course you do. You were in a calorie deficit and you were running off that deficit for quite some time. It is almost impossible for you to feel as good as you would in the gym eating at maintenance level as you would in a deficit. So a deficit is really kind of a tricky time frame where you should just be being very graceful with yourself, gracious with yourself, and moving from those deficit phases to those maintenance phases is a very, very important thing that I think a lot of people have never actually done successfully. Once you do it once and you see that you actually maintain within a pound to 2 pounds over the holidays, and again, that's kind of a normal fluctuation anyhow. For those of you who have not been in the program and hit your macros subsequently for 30 days in a row without having much variable, it's very, very hard for you to experience the truth behind doing a maintenance phase if you haven't actually hit your macro numbers, for more than 30 days. There are some people who are beginners, and some beginners do take a lot longer to get compliant and adherent. But once you get compliant and adherent and you start seeing that beautiful midweek low trend, it's kind of like remotivating yourself every Monday or every Tuesday or every Friday when you check in to chase that next one, because I typically predict what's coming up. And if you are adherent, I'm typically right. Now, again, that's just because I've seen a lot of data. And, again, the more data you see, the better conclusions you can draw. So again, when I see people traveling, I know there's going to be a little recoil after travel. When I see people adding expenditure or subtracting it, I know there's going to be a little recoil. The body is so smart, it legitimately recalibrates itself to whatever energy intake you give it, or whatever you expend, and whatever calories and energy you take in. Sorry about that. So again, one of the most key and critical parts of learning how to come out of fat loss phases is having a plan. How we're going to come out of your fat loss phases, whether they're 2 weeks long, 3 weeks long, 8 weeks long, 12 weeks long, it doesn't really matter the length and duration. We're going to either slowly and gradually increase you, or we're just going to put you close to your perceived maintenance, and we're going to have you stay there. Now, that would be dependent on how the person has tracked and what their brain type and coaching abilities kind of, all come into play in this equation look like. So if the person has not been adherent the whole fat loss phase, they need to go back and probably work on some of the things that are hindering their mindset and the preparation that goes into planning and preparing for successful weeks on a diet. Again, it's way more work to be in a calorie deficit in some respects because you have to prep more food. But likewise, it's just as much work in the maintenance phase, because at the end of the day, you've got to look at your macro budget and you still need to make sure that you hit your macros, because if not, you're going to be falling short of that maintenance, which means if you're trying to build lean body mass, you may not have the energy reserves to do that. Okay, you may not have what's needed in order to actually structure your program for a building or lean mass building program. So again, fat loss would require a deficit. Maintenance just means you're maintaining your weight. A lot of people think, oh, I'm at my maintenance because, my weight's not changing. Well, you haven't been adherent to the numbers. That's why your weight isn't changing. So if you're correcting every week, you're coming back to a stable point. That is actually a win if you have not been hitting your macros. Again, it's not all or nothing. There's going to be weeks where you do very well and you just track your food, but you were slightly off and you were not accurate enough to see fat loss, but you were accurate enough to maintain what you've lost so far. And that is also a win. Okay. So winning is being able to correct quickly. Winning is being able to make mistakes. And we're going to be doing that during the holidays. There's probably going to be time frames where you just electively decide to be a little bit over on fats and carbs certain days. And that's not going to happen every day. But if it happens 2 or 3 times out of the month, is that going to game wreck your entire fat loss program? No. That's why it's important to decide right now in October and early November what you want to see as far as tangible results in December. Some of you want to live life to its absolute fullest because the holiday time is the most important time frame to you and your family members. And that is totally okay. And that would mean that a diet break would work really well, but you still do need to track your food. Because if you don't track your food and you have no balanced budget, then you probably will regain that 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 pounds at the expense of having to work another 10 to 12 weeks for some of you realistically to get that off and do it slowly again. I'd rather you maintain what you've worked so hard for in the program this year than regain all that weight back because every day was just off and all over the place. And if you think about it, that was essentially why you started coaching with us in the first place, is you didn't know what you needed on a regular basis. And once you saw that you needed this amount for a deficit and this amount for maintenance, you now have a dart shooting point on that board. Now you know what to shoot for. And if you're within 20% on that, you are probably going to maintain through the holidays. So here are the areas that I see most impactful as far as fat regain. One, if dietary fats are off every single day, that's probably a cocktail for disaster, where with protein and carbs, you have a little bit more to play around with because protein and carbs are only worth 4 calories per gram, while dietary fat is a second or reserve energy source, and it is worth 9 calories per gram. The more you're off on dietary fat, also with the human variable being in there of error, I account for 5 grams of fat overage or being under, so being off on fats in our program. I kind of just bury that into my equation when I'm looking at people's spreadsheets each week. And if they're at or above by a gram, 2 or 3, again, they're still going to fall within those perfect percentage ranges. So the tighter you can be in your deficit phases with hitting those macros in those estimated ranges, the better results you're going to see because you're going to be closer to calorie balance. Where in a maintenance phase, you got a little more to play around with. You probably realistically could be over 15, 20 grams on carbs 1 or 2 days out of your week and not even have it impact your weight as long as you're getting your protein needs met and dietary fat looks pretty good. Where I start to see big problems is when people eat more fat and carbs and not enough protein, and they're right back to where they were when they started the program, which is just all over the board. So that is why tracking and weighing yourself through the holiday season is going to be important. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to be a strict psychomaniac, because some of you are going to loosen up the reins for 3 to 4 weeks. You might actually only weigh yourself 1 or 2 times, and that's just at the beginning of your week and maybe 2 times before you send your data over for an objective, wonderful check-in with your coach. And that is just wonderful. That's perfect. That's going to work. Now, for the other half of you that need more accountability and more structure, you probably are going to weigh yourself almost every day because you know that you are not the brain type that can be trusted not to have accountability. Or you might be that 1B, 1A, 2B personality where you do place a lot of your confirmation, affirmation, and finishability in the numbers of actually weighing yourself and seeing those averages and saying, yes, my averages look absolutely perfect for this week. People that kind of run the race and finish the race usually have to have the reward. And a lot of times that means that, you are going to be one of those people that wants to see yourself weigh yourself every morning just to kind of be reassuring that what you're doing is working. That's okay too. So there are a couple different ways to approach going into the holiday season. One of them is setting up more structure than you need or the same as you do in your fat loss phases. And the other way, and there's actually probably 3 or 4 ways to approach this, but the other way that works well for most people is to have it planned that you're going to do this time frame of 21 days or 3 weeks where you do not weigh yourself more than just at the beginning of the week and a couple days before you check in, or you put your average readings and macros into the spreadsheet. Because again, the only reason that we track macros is not to want to hang yourself or have it be some kind of daunting task or chore. It's to fix what we did during the week that we may not have even really seen because we're so used to tracking. But once you put it in an Excel, you're like, oh, dang, I had like 3 or 4 days that were way more than moderately off. I fell into that 15 or 20% range where this week I'm probably just going to maintain. And again, during the holidays, maintaining is a huge win. So I would rather you start right at or, within 1 to 2 pounds of where you went into the holiday season. and work 7 to 10 hard days to get back to that midweek low and just run into January at a total run and not, crawling before we walk again. And some of you will actually come out of December so ready after your diet breaks that you will run straight into catching momentum into a sprint. And you'll be probably pretty close to where your goal weight is and where you like to see yourself on that scale after the holiday season. So realistically, we all want to lose weight during the holidays, I bet, if we're in a fat loss phase right now. But ideally, it would be better for you to kind of slow down and then speed back up, slow down and speed back up. It's when people actually stop these processes, they don't track. That's where we find ourselves back in that yo-yo dieting mentality, even with macro tracking. I want flexible dieting and macro tracking to be something that you can absolutely rely on. And that is why it's very, very important not only to treat the holidays this way, but to treat your spring breaks and your summer breaks. And perhaps you start going through a very difficult time frame as a human, and you need to just be able to pull back and say, you know what? I'm only going to be 70 or 80% right now, but I'm not going to stop tracking. I'm going to stay in the game. I'm going to live life in that gray area, and I'm going to give it 70 or 80% effort. That is enough most of the time to maintain. It's when people go to 0% that things start to get ugly again. Thanks for joining us tonight, you guys. I really appreciate all of the wonderful accolades on session 1 and 2. And next week, we're going to be doing a dynamic shift. So I'm going to give a little bit of time between part 4, probably 2 weeks, and then we'll pick back up again in November with part 4 and 5. And this is an 8-part series, so join us back here next week when we're going to be talking about a lot of the pitfalls that come with eating out.